You were trained to believe that playing fair would make you safe. Follow the rules, be loyal, be reasonable, be the man people can trust. And yet the more honest you are, the easier you are to ignore. The kinder you are, the easier you are to exploit. Because the world doesn't reward goodness. It rewards leverage. Most people spend their lives chasing approval, never realizing that approval is the leash used to control them. But there comes a moment when something inside you changes. A moment when you stop asking for permission to exist and start deciding how the game will actually be played. That transformation is what Machiavelli understood better than almost anyone. Not power through noise, not dominance through anger, but control through silent strategy and psychological distance. In this video, I will show you how that transformation works. How to stop being predictable, how to move in ways people can't read, and how real power is built without ever announcing it. So if you're ready to see the rules most people never notice, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what comes next will change the way you see every interaction. Now let's break down Machiavelli's darkest lessons about power in silence. The first thing you must destroy is the part of you that wants to be seen. Most people never notice this weakness because it hides behind something that looks noble, the desire to be appreciated, to be recognized, to have your effort acknowledged. But beneath that surface sits a dangerous mechanism. The moment you need recognition, you become predictable, and predictable people are easy to control. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Rulers did not lose power because they lacked intelligence or strength. They lost it because they wanted credit. They wanted applause. They wanted history to remember them as loved. The moment a leader needs admiration, the crowd owns him. Because whoever controls your validation controls your behavior. That is the trap. When you act to be seen, you reveal your intentions too early. You explain your strategy before it matures. You signal your ambitions before they are secure. And the world does what it always does with exposed ambition. It resists it. Real power begins the moment you stop performing for an audience. Psychological invisibility is not about hiding your presence. It is about removing the emotional dependency on recognition. Your actions no longer seek approval. They seek outcomes, quietly, methodically. Watch the difference in ordinary situations. A man desperate to be recognized enters a meeting and begins asserting himself immediately. He speaks loudly. He interrupts. He explains every idea with urgency. Old response. Let me clarify what I meant. I want everyone to understand my position, but the disciplined mind moves differently. He observes first. He listens longer than others expect. When he speaks, it is brief and precise. Disciplined response. Let's focus on the result. No performance, no explanation, just direction. The first man is seeking acknowledgement. The second is shaping the room. That difference is invisible to most people, but the nervous system of everyone present feels it immediately. One man needs the room. The other man controls the room. And this is where the deeper mechanism appears. Human beings instinctively respect what does not ask for their approval. When you detach from the need to be liked, something strange happens. People begin trying to earn your approval instead. You are no longer reacting to the room begins reacting to you. So let them underestimate you. Let them assume you are irrelevant. Let them speak louder while you observe longer. Because power rarely announces itself. It accumulates quietly, decision by decision, influence by influence. By the time people realize where the control actually sits, the structure has already shifted, and that leads to the next principle. If invisibility is the beginning of power, then the next step is far more unsettling. You must learn how fear actually works. Power rarely begins with force. It begins with a feeling, not rage, not intimidation, something quieter, something deeper, fear. But not the crude version people imagine, not shouting, not threats. Those belong to insecure men. The fear that Machiavelli described is subtle. It lives in hesitation, in the small pause before someone challenges you, in the slight change of tone when your name enters a conversation. Most people chase love because love feels safe. But love has a hidden weakness. Love invites familiarity, and familiarity dissolves authority. The more people feel comfortable around you, the more they test your boundaries. They interrupt you, they question you, they push a little further each time. Fear works differently. Fear sharpens attention, it forces calculation. This is why Machiavelli wrote that men are far less cautious offending someone who wants to be loved than someone who commands fear. Not because fear is cruel, but because fear establishes limits where affection cannot. The psychological mechanism is simple. The human brain constantly scans for consequences. When consequences are unclear, behavior expands. When consequences are certain, behavior contracts. So, the real question is not whether people like you. The real question is what their nervous system does when they think about crossing you. Look at a common situation. Someone challenges you in front of others. The typical reaction is emotional, defensive, immediate, old response. That's not what I meant. Let me explain. You can feel the impulse, the need to correct the misunderstanding, to restore fairness. But watch what happens when someone disciplined responds instead. Disciplined response, silence. A brief pause, then a calm redirection. We're moving forward. No argument, no defense, just closure. The room notices something immediately. The conflict evaporates, but the tension remains, because no one is sure what line they just approached. That uncertainty creates caution, and caution becomes respect. This is the form of fear Machiavelli understood. It does not humiliate people. It calibrates them. People begin to measure their words more carefully. They reconsider impulsive challenges. They adjust their behavior without being told to. You never threatened them. You conditioned them. That is the difference between authority and aggression. Aggression demands obedience through noise. Authority produces obedience through anticipation. People restrain themselves because they sense consequences even when you say nothing. Over time, your presence becomes a signal. When you enter the room, the atmosphere shifts slightly. Conversations slow, jokes soften. People sit a little straighter, not because you demanded it, because they have learned something about crossing you. Fear, when controlled, becomes the most stable currency of power. It does not fluctuate with popularity. It does not vanish when people disagree with you. It simply reminds them where the line is. And once that line exists, a different kind of influence becomes possible. Because the next level of power does not rely on fear alone. It relies on unpredictability. Predictability is the silent killer of authority. The moment people can forecast your reactions, they begin adjusting around them, not with respect, but with strategy. They learn exactly how far they can push, exactly what tone will trigger you, exactly when you will forgive them. And once that map exists in their minds, your power is no longer yours. It belongs to whoever understands your pattern. This is why Machiavellian discipline demands something uncomfortable. You must become difficult to read, not emotional chaos, not erratic behavior, controlled unpredictability. Most people are easy to model. They smile when praised. They react when provoked. They explain when misunderstood. Their behavior follows a script so familiar that anyone with patience can manipulate it. But when your responses stop following the script, the entire psychological balance shifts. People hesitate. they reconsider their approach. They begin measuring every move more carefully because they no longer know what triggers you. Watch the mechanism in ordinary conversation. Someone makes a subtle jab. The predictable person reacts immediately. Old response. What do you mean by that? The tension escalates. Voices rise. The room divides into sides. The attacker gets exactly what he wanted, emotional movement. But the disciplined mind refuses the bait. Disciplined response. A brief glance, no expression. Then the conversation moves elsewhere. The jab dies instantly. Now the attacker faces something far more uncomfortable than confrontation, uncertainty. Did you ignore it because it was irrelevant, because you noticed something they didn't, because you simply chose not to respond? They cannot tell. And the human mind hates unsolved signals. That is where power quietly grows. People begin projecting their own fears into your silence. They start imagining consequences you never described. They replay the moment later, wondering if they miscalculated. Predictability invites control. Ambiguity invites caution. This is not cruelty, it is design. When people cannot anticipate your emotional triggers, they stop trying to provoke them. When they cannot predict your approval, they start working harder to earn it. Your reactions become rare, and rarity amplifies significance. A single nod from someone unpredictable carries more weight than constant praise from someone transparent. Over time, your presence acquires a strange gravity. Conversations slow when you listen. People choose their words more carefully, not because you demand obedience, but because they sense there is a deeper calculation happening behind your silence. And that is the real shift. You are no longer reacting to the environment begins reacting to you. But unpredictability alone is not enough. If you remain calm all the time, people adapt again. They begin assuming your restraint is permanent, which leads to the next principle. True authority requires something even more unsettling: occasional consequences. Constant aggression destroys authority. Constant tolerance destroys it even faster. Most people live trapped between these two mistakes. They either react to every offense, which makes them look unstable, or they tolerate everything which quietly erodes their boundaries. But real power operates on a different rhythm. Calm most of the time, uncompromising when necessary. Machiavelli understood this pattern well. If a ruler punishes every minor challenge, he becomes predictable and exhausting. If he never punishes at all, people stop taking his authority seriously. The balance lies in rarity. Consequences must be infrequent but unforgettable. The psychology behind this is simple. The human brain remembers extremes. Routine discipline fades into background noise, but a single unexpected consequence reshapes behavior instantly. Think about a common situation. Someone crosses a line in conversation. The predictable response is emotional correction. Old response: "You shouldn't talk to me like that." The room hears the complaint, but nothing changes, because complaints carry no weight. They are requests disguised as authority. The disciplined response is different. No argument, no raised voice, just a quiet shift in behavior. Disciplined response. The conversation ends. The opportunity disappears. Access quietly closes. No drama, no explanation. Days later, the person realizes something subtle has changed. Invitations stop arriving. Their influence shrinks. Doors they expected to open remain closed. That moment rewires their memory. Because now the consequence is not theoretical, it is experienced. You did not punish loudly. You simply adjusted the structure around them. And structures are what people fear losing. This is why effective authority uses consequences sparingly. 95% of the time you remain composed, controlled, almost indifferent to friction, but the remaining 5% carries precision. When the line is crossed, the response is final. No speeches, no emotional closure, just distance. This creates something powerful inside the social environment. People begin policing themselves before you ever need to intervene. They watch your reactions carefully. They correct their own behavior to avoid repeating the mistake they witnessed. Your authority becomes anticipatory rather than reactive. But there is an even more subtle layer to this discipline. A mechanism that most people never recognize because it works through absence instead of action. When used correctly, absence amplifies influence more than presence ever could, which leads to the next move in the architecture of silent power. Presence attracts attention, absence creates gravity. Most people misunderstand influence because they assume it grows through visibility. Speak more, show up everywhere. Respond immediately. Stay involved in every conversation so no one forgets you. But the human mind does something strange with constant availability. It normalizes it. What is always present stops feeling valuable. Power follows the opposite law. When something becomes rare, the mind begins assigning weight to it. Silence becomes louder. Distance becomes meaningful. People start filling the empty space with speculation. This is why absence, when used, deliberately multiplies influence. Think about the ordinary behavior people expect. Messages are answered instantly. Invitations are accepted quickly. Opinions are shared immediately. Predictable, continuous, available. Old response. Sorry for the delay. I just saw this. Here's what I think. It feels polite, responsible, cooperative, but it also signals something deeper. Your time is flexible, your attention is easily accessed, your presence is predictable. Now watch the disciplined alternative, disciplined response. Silence for a while, a delayed reply, a brief answer when it finally arrives. No apology, no explanation. Nothing dramatic happens on the surface, but internally the other person begins adjusting. They check their messages more often. They reread the last interaction. They begin wondering what you are thinking. The mind dislikes unfinished signals, and absence creates unfinished signals everywhere. This is why strategic distance changes the psychological structure around you. People start valuing your attention because they cannot assume it. Conversations feel heavier because your presence is no longer constant. You become the variable in the environment. Even in physical spaces, the same principle applies. The person who speaks constantly fades into background noise. The one who observes quietly and speaks occasionally becomes the reference point of the room. When they finally say something, everyone listens. Not because the voice is louder, because the silence before it carried weight. Over time, absence shapes perception in another way. People begin imagining the influence you hold when you are not there. They reference your decisions in conversations you never joined. They anticipate your reaction before taking action. Your presence extends beyond your physical location. And this is the paradox Machiavelli admired in powerful figures. The strongest rulers were not always the most visible ones. They were often the ones whose influence continued operating even in their absence. They did not chase attention. Their reputation made attention come to them. This is why power does not chase. Power lingers. It sits quietly at the edge of the room while others compete for recognition. And slowly, without announcement, everything begins orbiting around it. But there is one final discipline that determines whether this architecture of power holds or collapses. It has nothing to do with silence, absence, or strategy. It has to do with emotion. The final weakness is not visibility. It is not predictability. It is emotion. Not emotion itself. Everyone feels it. The real danger is when emotion becomes the steering wheel. The moment anger, guilt, pride, or affection starts directing your decisions, your behavior becomes readable again. And readable behavior can always be controlled. This is the chain most people never break. They train themselves to stay calm in public, to manage appearances, to delay reactions. But deep down, their choices are still guided by the same impulses: the need to be understood, the need to feel justified, the need to prove they are right. Machiavelli saw this clearly. He did not deny emotion. He studied it. He dissected it. But he never allowed it to dictate action, because emotion broadcasts information. The moment someone can provoke anger from you, they have discovered a lever. The moment guilt forces you to explain yourself, they have discovered another. Pride, sympathy, resentment. Each one becomes a handle someone else can pull, and the world is full of people quietly searching for those handles. Look at a common confrontation. Someone insults you in front of others. The emotional instinct appears instantly. Old response. That's unfair. You don't understand the situation. It feels reasonable, honest, human. But it also exposes something valuable you care about, correcting the perception, which means the attacker now knows where the pressure point sits. The disciplined response removes that handle completely. Disciplined response: a brief pause, no visible reaction. Then the conversation moves elsewhere. The insult hangs in the air for a moment and then dies on its own. What just happened is subtle but decisive. The attacker was expecting emotional fuel. When it never arrives, the moment collapses. The energy returns to them. They look unstable. You remain immovable. That difference changes the power dynamic instantly. Emotion-driven behavior reacts to the moment. Strategy-driven behavior chooses the moment. This does not mean becoming cold or inhuman. It means refusing to outsource your decisions to temporary feelings. Anger becomes information. Pain becomes data. Praise becomes noise rather than direction. You feel everything, but you obey none of it. That discipline produces something rare in human environments: stability. People around you begin sensing that provocation does not move you, flattery does not distract you, and pressure does not accelerate your decisions. You operate on a different rhythm. And when someone operates on a rhythm others cannot disrupt, a strange transformation occurs. Their presence begins to feel inevitable. Not loud, not aggressive, just immovable. At that point, the architecture of power is complete. You are no longer reacting to the system around you. You are quietly shaping it. This is the truth most people spend their lives avoiding. Power begins the moment you stop reacting. There will be moments. Someone misreads you in a meeting and you feel the urge to correct them. A friend questions your decision and you want to explain your reasoning. Someone throws a subtle jab and every instinct pushes you to defend your name. You will feel it. The pull to speak, to justify, to repair how you are being perceived. And if you follow that impulse, you hand the frame to them. But when you hold silence, something different happens. The room shifts. The person who expected your reaction suddenly has to fill the space themselves. Their motives surface, their tone changes, their certainty fades. You do nothing. Yet the structure of the moment bends. That is the transition. From reaction to self-command, from impulse to discipline, from noise to clarity. You stop trying to control what people think. You start controlling how you move. If this perspective sharpened something in you, subscribe and leave a short comment. Silent strength, cold clarity, no reaction, because once you see the mechanics of power this clearly, you cannot unsee them.